The Denver Broncos are gearing up for a Sunday showdown against the Las Vegas Raiders in their Week 1 season opener. To help set the table, we have a Broncos mailbag from avid listeners and viewers of the show. Plus, we dive into a Monday recap of practice where you're going to hear from Broncos inside linebacker Alex Singleton and rookie cornerback Riley Moss as they met with the media in an open locker room period following Monday's practice. You're going to get that and much more with a cup of coffee on this morning's GMB. Good morning, Broncos Country. Welcome into another episode of GMB here on Mile High Sports YouTube channel here. Every team, every day, if you're a Colorado sports fan, you get coverage of the Broncos, the Rockies, the Nuggets, and the Avalanche here. I'm Cody Roark. I cover the Denver Broncos as a reporter for Mile High Sports. If you're tuning in here on YouTube, do us a favor. If you love Broncos content and conversation every single weekday at 9 o'clock a.m., this is the place to be. Pour yourself a cup of coffee, sit down, and let's talk about all things Denver Broncos here. The regular season is officially upon us, and to set the table for that, we put a little bit of a mailbag out every single week there at milehighsports.com. We'll have a weekly mailbag edition where you, the avid listeners or viewers of the show, can send in your questions. So make sure if you have a Broncos question you want to ask, you can stay tuned to me putting a prompt out on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, or you could shoot me an email, Cody@milehighsports.com with your Broncos question, and we'll be sure to feature it next week in the website in written format and plus here on the GMB Morning Show. So let's start off before we get into a little bit of a recap of Monday's practice, setting the table for Sunday's game. Let's get into our mailbag here from the avid listeners in Broncos Country. This comes in from my man D-Mark, always commenting, always showing love here on the YouTube channel. Ask the question here. For the Denver Broncos season to be considered successful, would that be playoffs or bust for Sean Payton, or would it be a winning record? And look, I think ideally every single year for Broncos Country, the expectations are always massively high, and rightfully so. That's been the tradition of the franchise. It's always been known as a team that's always competing for world championships or winning games, and certainly under Pat Bowlen, that was the standard. But since Peyton Manning retired in 2015, the Broncos have struggled to win games. They've been a losing franchise. They've had a losing culture on the field, and Sean Payton was brought in this offseason to help turn that around. Now, what would constitute a successful season? It's tough when you look at it from the NFL side of things. You consider the division that Denver is in, the AFC West. We don't know what the Raiders are going to look like, but they have a lot of talent. You can't deny that. The Los Angeles Chargers just loaded up with Justin Herbert. They added a really good wide receiver in the NFL draft to combine with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. They have, a healthy Joey Bosa. You look at the Chiefs, they're top dog until somebody dethrones them. Denver has, I think, made a lot of great moves to put them in a position to compete this year. Now, if the Broncos don't make the playoffs, does that mean that it is an unsuccessful season? To an extent, yeah. But I don't necessarily agree that it would be a failure or an unsuccessful season in general. We already know Sean Payton, the expectation is this team, I'll be pissed if this team doesn't make the playoffs. That's what he said in his USA Today interview. But you also have to factor in, this is a brand new offense. It's a brand new team. There's a lot of new faces around, a lot of new players, over 20-plus new players on the roster this year than there were in comparison to last year. And change could be good, right? This could benefit the Broncos in a big way. If Denver goes 9-8, right, finishes with a winning record, but misses out in the playoffs, I don't think that would be a failure of a season. I don't think that would be unsuccessful in the long run, right? In the short term, obviously the goal is to always compete for the division, compete for a playoff spot, 100%. Understand that. 31 other teams fall short of a successful season if we look at it from that standpoint. But for Denver, I think it's a step in the right direction, right, to get back to winning, right? If Denver finishes 9-8, obviously losing 8 games is never fun. But if you can win 9 games, win more games than you have won, I mean, honestly, 9 wins was the last winning season Denver had, and they went 9-7, and that was the year following Super Bowl 50. They did that with Trevor Siemian. With the added additional regular season game, it certainly makes things very intriguing here. But if Denver's more competitive, if they look competent, and they're challenging opposing teams, to me, if they finish with a 9-8 record, even if they miss the playoffs, I still think that's a successful step in the right direction. Now, ultimately, the goal is to win a championship. Very hard for so many teams to do just that. But I think Broncos fans would take this team being more competitive and saying, you know what, hey, they're heading in the right direction versus, it just crashing and falling the way it did in 2022. So for me, a successful season. I mean, I think playoffs, if they Denver made the playoffs, that's a tremendous success, right? Because I don't think that was necessarily the expectation for Denver in the eyes of so many people outside of the building. They look at Denver, okay, hey, new head coach. How's he going to manage with Russell Wilson? These are all valid questions, but I would say from my observation, Denver has looked so much better in just terms of how they prepare, how they go about practice, how they've looked in preseason games with the starters in there. Obviously, there's going to be some challenges. There's going to be some adversity that they face this year, but I do think that Denver will be a better team this upcoming season, and we've seen from them in years. And I think that's a good sign in the right direction there. Sean Payton is truly the X factor in this whole entire conversation and how it goes here. My man Larry Vaughn, Rich City _804 on Twitter, sends in the question, what is the level of concern with the Broncos wide receiver position and depth? I'll be very honest with you right now. I'm not necessarily concerned or worried right now, and here's why. Sean Payton is the reason why here. And I look back at some of the Saints teams that he's been part of. Let's go back specifically to 2020 when Drew Brees was banged up. I mean, you look at the Saints offense, they've always been built to run the football, right, with Alvin Kamara and mixing in Taysom Hill every once in a while. But when Drew Brees was there, I felt like there was a balance between the pass and the run there. You had to respect both. And really, we've seen in situations where Drew Brees got hurt, Sean Payton built an offensive game plan around what Taysom Hill does really well as an athlete in the run game. Obviously, Latavius Murray went off in a big game there against the Broncos in that one game where Kendall Hinton was the quarterback. But I've seen over the course over years, and even in 2021, 2020, 2019, when they've dealt with injuries to wide receiver, Sean Payton has always found an answer, and they've still remained competitive in that division there in the NFC South. So for me, yes, you only have 3 healthy wide receivers coming into week 1. That's Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, and also Brandon Johnson. You're going to more than likely going to activate and call up, not Kendall Hinton, geez Louise, that's how far we've fallen here. They're going to more than likely call up little Jordan Humphrey to the active game day roster from the practice squad on Sunday leading up to kickoff. But we've talked about it here. Expect to see a lot of 12 and 13 personnel. 12 personnel is where you have 1 running back, 2 tight ends on the field. 13 personnel, 1 running back, 3 tight ends. A heavy run formation here. Denver wants to run the ball. They want to be very, very physical against whoever they play. And, the Las Vegas Raiders are going to be the first challenge there. Look, Max Crosby, Chandler Jones, Tyree Wilson. They got Marcus Peters at the cornerback spot, Nate Hobbs inside the nickel. They've got a tough defense on paper, and Denver's going to have to take it to them. So for me, even if you don't have Jerry Jeudy this week, which more than likely we will not see, we'll see how things go and progress throughout the week. Obviously, he's been doing some work on the side field. I'm not necessarily worried right now because I've seen Sean Payton adjust to his personnel groupings. And I think the way that the roster is constructed here under Payton, it's, if we do suffer an injury to this guy, we have to be able to not just, if this guy goes down, it means our whole operation shuts down. That's where Sean Payton, his experience comes in, is that, okay, yes, it's unfortunate if you don't have Jerry Jeudy. It's a big loss that you lost Tim Patrick in the offseason during training camp here. But here's what we can do to maybe counteract that blow. And like I said, a lot of tight end utilization here. You can still bring up wide receivers from the practice squad to your game day roster. Denver's going to have some bodies, but it's going to raise the level of expectations. You're going to see a little bit more of a branch in the passing game to running backs out of the backfield. You need to be able to have this balance versus, okay, we just need to go to this guy. Sean Payton is going to find a way to do just that. So I think that is a fantastic question that you have thrown our way here, Larry. Let's get to another one here. Orange_Crush512. Are you surprised the team didn't bring back Montrell Washington to the practice squad? I'll be very honest with you, a little bit. I was a little bit surprised that they didn't do that, and here's why. When you look at where Denver is at, obviously with Marvin Mims, we just talked about it as well, right? 3 healthy receivers on the active roster, Marvin Mims being one of them. He is their expected kick returner, punt returner here. Now, for me, if you value Marvin Mims and what he can do for you on the offensive side of the ball, especially with Jerry Jeudy injured, do you want to risk putting him back there at return where maybe a guy gets thrown into him, doesn't see that he maybe fair catches one and then bam, gets blasted. You expose him to a little bit more risk of injury doing that. But, I think Montreal would have been a great insurance policy. But now he's with the Kansas City Chiefs. Now watch him going to have a ton of success there. I think Montreal would have been a good option here, but I can see why Denver didn't keep him on the roster from a personnel standpoint. And it's simply because of the fact that he didn't have much of a role on the offensive side of the ball, could never carve anything out for him, which is surprising because last year in training camp, we saw a lot of Montrell Washington going downfield, making some plays against the Broncos defense and maybe getting some preseason run as well. He's just buried on the wide receiver depth chart here for the Broncos in this training camp. And Now he's with the Kansas City Chiefs. But yeah, I think that was interesting that they didn't look to bring him back. I was surprised they didn't bring Kendall Hinton back on the practice squad either. That was a little bit of a surprise to me. We'll get to a few more here. Nthine24 on Twitter says, does Drew Sanders take over at inside linebacker during the season? No, not in the way that I think a lot of people suggest. Look, Josie Jewell, Alex Singleton, these are the two guys. These guys are locks to play at the inside backer position here, but do expect to see some Drew Sanders in certain personnel packages. I mean, Vance Joseph has hinted and alluded to it. Sean Payton has mentioned it. He's too talented of a player to not get playing time. Obviously, he's going to play some special teams for them, but they can get creative with his 6'5" size, his athleticism, his wingspan, his ability to cover across the middle of the field. They're going to use that in certain situations, and I can't wait to see maybe how they unleash it. Do they maybe put him in certain situations as an edge rusher? Possibly. I mean, he's a freak athlete, so we'll see what Vance Joseph has in store, but the only way I could see Drew Sanders taking over at inside linebacker is if there's an injury to Alex Singleton or Josie Jewell. He's the next guy up to go in there and play for them. So a lot of things to keep an eye on here. And then our last one comes in from Colby J. Hartman on Twitter. Says, who leads the Broncos in touches at running back in week 1? Great question here. Not sure how this is going to go, but here's maybe how I think it may go for the Broncos. They have not yet determined whether or not Javonte is going to be on a little bit of a pitch count to start the season, considering, he's made tremendous recovery from his ACL, got a lot of run against the 49ers. It was great to see him respond there, but you have 3 backs. You have Javonte, you have Samaje Perine, and you also have Jaleel McLaughlin here. I would not be shocked if we see overall, and Sean Payton might say this during the week here, so keep an eye on this. It's not necessarily about how many carries Javonte gets, but I'm curious to see how many snaps on the field he gets in comparison to Samaje, in comparison to Jaleel McLaughlin. In my opinion, I would not be shocked if we really do see a true by-committee approach here for the Broncos here in week 1 here. Broncos Country, that is our Broncos mailbag wrap-up here. We're going to set the table, though, for a conversation. Monday's practice, what did we learn from Dove Valley? What did we hear from Broncos inside linebacker Alex Singleton, rookie cornerback Riley Moss? Well, you're going to get that here on today's episode of GMB. Real quick, let me give a special shout-out to our friends over there at Superbook Sports. Why bet with the big boys this football season? Well, instead, try your hand with the local book, Superbook Sports, this fall. Superbook Sports is the book next door, just a dedicated team of the best odds makers in Las Vegas, making sure you get the best prices and parlays anywhere. And now Superbook will give you a bonus of up to $250 when you sign up and wager on the same day and use promo code MileHigh. So bet with the best and use promo code MileHigh this football season with Superbook Sports. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. What did we learn from Monday in Dove Valley here? Well, Broncos Country, let's talk about it as well. Now, for us in the media, it's going to be a little bit different in terms of what we're able to talk about and what we're even able to see at practice going forward. We get access to about 15, 25 minutes of practice. So we get a view, obviously, stretch, individual period, a little bit, a tiny bit after individual, and then bang, we're out of there until we have podium where we're going to talk with Coach Payton or a player, or we get open locker room access. So a lot of the things that we're going to be discussing is going to really pertain around, okay, who was on the side field, who was participating during practice, who was seen out there, and what do we learn from the press conference availability? More so, you're going to get a little more in-depth stuff in the locker room. And what I mean by that is we had a chance to have an open locker room period on Monday. You'll get to talk with Broncos inside linebacker Alex Singleton and Broncos rookie cornerback Riley Moss. Now, first off, let's start with Riley Moss here as we go through our conversation on today's episode of GMB. Riley Moss, this was his first official practice back after undergoing core muscle surgery in terms of doing stuff in a limited capacity. And what I mean by that, when a player is designated as limited, that usually means that they participated in individual drills. So he was there during team stretch. He was there for individual drills. We do not know if he's going to play on Sunday against the Raiders, but with all the time that he's missed, not being able to physically participate because the injury happened during the first week of training camp, Broncos cornerback Riley Moss touched on what it was like and how valuable it was for him to get mental reps while not being able to get the physical reps.
Obviously not being able to physically participate, that had to take a little bit of a toll to you. How did you approach maybe the mental rep side of it from the recovery, being in the film room and things like that?
Yeah, it's a blessing in disguise. Obviously you don't want to get hurt, but you can kind of sit back and watch the guys and watch it from a different perspective, and you get a lot of knowledge from that, and so I did a good job of doing that, watching film, understanding the defense a little bit more, which is nice because it's a little bit, less pressure. When you're hurt, you're off the field, you're able to actually, kind of learn this stuff. So,
and I can attest to this as well. I think anytime that you're on the shelf and you're banged up, you ever played sports, you ever played football, you know exactly what it's like. Coaches always tell you, hey, get mental reps, right? What does that mean? It means visualize yourself in that role, right? If you're not able to physically participate in practice, if you're watching your job, you're watching your corner spot, like for Riley Moss, you're watching these other corners play there. Know what the call is. Know what the situation is down in distance. How would you react to what you're seeing from number one or number two in terms of the receivers, the flow, the route concepts? What angle would you take maybe if it's a run play? Like visualize yourself doing that job with the knowledge that you have there. Now you got to go carry that over as he's going to continue to build his way back in terms of getting into more football shape, getting some more physicality to him. He's excited to be able to go out there and play an impact on special teams, which I think we'll see a lot of that once he does make his full return, whenever that may be. But yeah, a lot of insight there from Riley Moss on the mental aspect side of things. Now let's get to Broncos inside linebacker Alex Singleton. And this is a tough week here. The Broncos have had a little bit of kryptonite against the Raiders, and that has been Josh Jacobs. He's been a thorn in their side. And Denver, I think, obviously they've lost 6 straight games to the Las Vegas Raiders, but I don't believe in Josh Jacobs' career as a member of the Raiders. I don't think he's ever lost to the Denver Broncos. I could be mistaken on that, but according to StatMuse, Josh Jacobs has averaged over 103 yards per game and 22 carries and 4.7 yards per carry against the Broncos through all of his career games there. Now, he has 9 career rushing touchdowns against the Broncos, 721 yards on 154 carries, and he's also had 15 catches for 158 yards out of the backfield. Broncos inside linebacker Alex Singleton, I think, touched on a very important thing that we're hearing from a national media perspective, right? Josh Jacobs obviously didn't participate much in training camp, holding out for a new contract here. They did a contract alteration a little bit, and now he's been back in the thing. A lot of people have just assumed that Josh Jacobs has been sitting on his couch eating potato chips and not doing anything. The Broncos don't buy that. And look, I think it would be asinine for them to do that. It'd be very naive to say, hey, Josh Jacobs hasn't participated much in training camp. That means he's not going to be as effective. Jacobs has been training. He's been in great shape. He doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on here. And Broncos inside linebacker Alex Singleton seems to think that, hey, they're going to get the best version of Josh Jacobs on Sunday when they take on the Raiders.
I don't think he's going to be fresh for this game. I think he's going to be the most fresh. When someone doesn't have to do camp, it saves a little mileage on their legs. And, he was in that offense last year, so he's going to, know what he's doing. And, yeah, we're going to go out there and it's going to take 11 guys to beat him. That's what we're going to have to do every play.
You have to find a way to slow down number 8 here for the Raiders. Been a thorn in the side. And look, it's going to be tough because here's how the Raiders will attack you. When you look at their personnel groupings, we do not know what they're going to look like just yet with Jimmy Garoppolo as their quarterback versus a guy like Derek Carr. Jimmy G's played in a very comprehensive offensive scheme in San Francisco under Kyle Shanahan, but you try to go back and maybe watch some of his other tape, when he was a member of the New England Patriots, when Josh McDaniels was there. Is there anything you can get him? I mean, he's in a different spot right now as a quarterback. So not only do you have to account for Josh Jacobs and the challenge that he presents, but there's Hunter Renfrow. There's new tight end Michael Mayer coming out of Notre Dame. There's Devontae Adams, who's such a challenge in and of himself. And there's Jacoby Myers, who's coming over from the New England Patriots. So, I mean, they have a ton of players on the offensive side of the ball that can really challenge the Broncos defense. Very curious to see what they decide to do and how they limit Josh Jacobs. But I think that's a huge key here. Limit Josh Jacobs and his ability to gash you in the way that he has for 4.7 yards per carry on a career average against you. And you might have a really good chance at winning. And Denver understands the importance of doing just that. And the buildup continues all throughout this week here on GMB as the Broncos prepare for Sunday's season opener at home in Power Field at Mile High against the Las Vegas Raiders. Very crucial game because you're opening up week 1 against a conference opponent, but you're also opening up against a divisional opponent. So, hey, this week 1 game is important because you need to win as many divisional games as you can, conference games as you can, because at the end of the year, this could be, hey, Denver was 1 game off from maybe making the playoffs. If they would have beat the Raiders, they would have been in the wild card. Or maybe this would have been a game that if they were close with Kansas City and them, maybe Denver gets the tiebreak over a situation like that. I mean, these things all matter right now at the end of the year. And Denver's going to open up the season with the Raiders. They're going to end the season with the Raiders. It'd be very interesting to see where the team is at from the start of it to the end of it. But Broncos Country, that'll wrap up this morning's GMB. Hope you enjoyed a cup of coffee. If you're like me, go get yourself another cup. Enjoy it. Make sure you eat a protein-filled breakfast. And join us tomorrow for a brand new episode of GMB here on Mile High Sports YouTube page. Special shout out to our friends over there, Superbook Sports. Thanks for sponsoring the show. Broncos Country. We'll see you tomorrow.